feel like if I'm in good standing with Jewish mothers, I must be doing something right. But this means the world to me, and I just want to thank all of the healthcare practitioners for everything you do to meet the healthcare needs of our country, our city, including the communities that I proudly represent. The question is not why have I chosen to be so outspoken against anti-Semitism. The question is why have others chosen silence amid the deadliest day for Jews since the Holocaust. You know, as a student of history, I'm reminded that there were Jewish Americans who gave their lives for the cause of civil rights. And Michael Schwerner, Andrew Goodman were murdered in the Mississippi burning so that people of color could have the right to vote and live unencumbered by the cruelty and inhumanity of Jim Crow. And so for me, the lesson learned from history is that we are all in this together. We all have a profoundly moral obligation to fight extremism, no matter what form it takes. And that obligation, that's my theme song. That obligation is not only based on the particularity of our identity, it's based on something more fundamental, which is our common humanity. And for me, October 7th was a crime against the Jewish state so barbaric that it was a frontal assault on our common humanity. And as far as I'm concerned, Hamas must be brought to justice. The crimes of Hamas cannot go unpunished and ignored, and I will stand unequivocally for Israel's right to defend itself. But I've been appalled by the barbaric reaction to October 7th here in our own country. You know, imagine speaking to an Israeli mother whose child was lost on October 7th. I cannot imagine anything more cruel and callous than telling that mother, you had this coming. You and your people brought this upon yourself. For me, this is not about politics. This is not about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is about human decency. It is indecent to blame the victims of terrorism rather than the terrorists themselves. It is indecent to glorify the terrorism of Hamas as quote-unquote resistance or decolonization or liberation. It is indecent to tear down posters of the hostages and promote images of the paragliders. And I'm reminded of a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King, who once said that history will record that the greatest tragedy is not the striding clamor of the bad people, but it's the appalling silence of the good people. Elie Wiesel said that the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. And what we've seen in the aftermath of October 7th is widespread indifference and silence and cowardice from so-called leaders in our society, college and university presidents, self-proclaimed progressives, human rights activists. And we as a society have to ask ourselves, if we cannot condemn the murder of innocents with moral clarity, then what are we becoming as a society? What does that reveal about the depth of anti-Semitism in the American soul? And so October 7th has been an awakening for the Jewish community, but it should be a reckoning for all of America. We in America have to confront the deepening rot of anti-Semitism on social media platforms, in college campuses, and yes, even in the halls of the United States Congress. You know, in Congress, we're debating whether there should be a ceasefire, and I have colleagues who introduced a resolution calling for a ceasefire without even calling for the release of the hostages. Right? The well-being of the hostages was an afterthought for them. And there's no greater supporter of an unconditional ceasefire than Hamas. Because a ceasefire would enable Hamas to remain in power, to rearm, to regroup, and launch even deadlier terrorist attacks than the atrocities of October 7th. And so you have my commitment that as long as I remain in Congress, I'm going to be an unequivocal champion of Israel's right to defend itself, just like I would be an unequivocal champion of America's right to defend itself. And I'll end on this note. You know, a few months ago, I had the honor of speaking at the National Mall in front of 300,000 people. And I was reminded that 2023 was a historic year because it was both the 75th anniversary of Israel's rebirth and the 60th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech. And those words, I have a dream, reminded me that the Jewish people have long had a dream of Jewish liberation through a Jewish state. And Israel is the realization of a dream. And there's no doubt in my mind that that dream, sustained by the U.S.-Israel relationship, will live on for the next 75 years and beyond. I'm Israel Hai. Thank you so much for having me.